Hey guys, I am Caleb with Nebraska Farm Boy. Thanks for joining me on another edition of Farm Boy in 30 Minutes. Yes, I'm not going to even apologize that it's been a long time because that's just the way things happen. You know, you guys probably wouldn't believe I lived on a farm if all of these came out once every week on time. Maybe it's just a discipline issue of mine, but I'm just saying, things happen. For the last week, I had a cold. I almost said I was cold. No, it's okay. It's actually been pretty warm. Well, actually, it was a little bit chilly the last week, but that is the one apology I will have for you, is that I probably sound like I still have a cold, because I kind of still do. Anyways, that's okay. If you guys listen to me in the first place, you probably won't mind that I have a cold, because it probably doesn't sound any worse than normal. Alright, so before we got started, I did have to mention the Nebraska Farm Boy t-shirt, which I can't show you the whole t-shirt because I have this jacket on, because, like I said, I was cold. Okay, so there will be a grand reveal at some point. It doesn't really matter right now because I've been trying to get them up for sale in case somebody wanted to buy my merch. I mean, you know, there might be a weird person out there, you know. So I was trying to get them up for sale, but woe unto the person who tries to sell anything online. How dare you try to sell anything, especially under 18. It's just like an absolute terror. You know, that's like a total podcast in and of itself, just talking about, you know, the difficulties and overcoming the difficulties of trying to grow a business under 18. And yes, that was my rooster in the room over from here. It's not my rooster, it's just a rooster in the room over from here. Anyways, so that's my life. I mean, if you want to really know what I was doing, I could tell you about chore time. That would probably just make me feel better, and you probably wouldn't really care. So anyways, what we are going to be talking about today is a topic that, you know, in a way it's kind of like exactly what this channel is all about, and in a way it's something that I avoid like a plague. And I'll just say it, it's, you know, being prepared, and how we as, you know, Christian young men should react to crisis. Because, you know, right now we live in a world where there's a lot of crisis, which, you know, everybody says this is like the most crisis-filled era, you know, that there's ever been. But there's always crises. I mean, imagine living through a world war, a dust bowl, or 2 world wars and a dust bowl. I mean, and a depression and all that in the course of like 40, I'll just say 40 years because that'll get all of that. Okay, so, you know, there's been bad times before, but, you know, right now there are some things going on. You know, there's the thought of what if war in Ukraine plus Israel-Hamas war plus all the other conflicts that are going on in our little world all come together, and then we get involved and it becomes World War III. There's that, and then there's always the open border problem. You know, what if there's terrorist cells coming in through our open border and forming in the United States? Not to mention there's just problems. There's nothing good about an open border, right? So there's that, and then we have the most important election in all of U.S. history coming up. Again, it happens every 4 years, the most important election. Every 4 years. You know, I don't know what's all that important about trying to decide between someone who's really not fit to lead the country and someone who is really not fit to lead the country. I mean, like, I'm not I don't want to get political here. It doesn't really matter what my political views are. It's just that regardless of who's running in the race, it shouldn't be as important as it is. And I don't want to get off, I won't go on this trail for long, but I just want to say this. The President of the United States was never supposed to have the power that he has. It should never have been this big of an issue of who is president. I mean, sure, it's important, you know. It would be really nice if we could be sure that our votes actually counted in election and all that great stuff. But, you know, it shouldn't be this important because the Constitution gives most of the power to Congress. You know why? Because Congress never gets anything done. Whereas if the president is allowed to make a bunch of executive orders, that's where we start running into problems. It's like the reason why the election has to be such a stressful thing is that we've made the president into a form of, I hate to even say it, but dictator, And so, I don't know. It's just kind of like, you're looking at the wrong problem. Don't freak out about the candidate so much as maybe you should take some time to think about what we're actually doing here. Anyways, crisis. Whatever you want to look at it, however you want to look at it. So we have that, and then there's also, when is the next, I don't even know how many of these things I want to say, because some of these things you're not supposed to talk about on YouTube. When's the next government-initiated panic? Okay, when's the next government-initiated panic? And it's just there's a lot of crises. Not to mention, like, if you're not a person to be really freaked out by all these big crises, there's all these little crises close to home. Be it, inflation is making all of your dollars, count for less and less, which means that you have to work harder and harder to, put food on the table. That's a problem, and or be it that you look around and you see that we have very fragile systems of, food, transportation, electricity, like a very fragile grid of all these areas. Something very small could happen and, you're out of power or food or transportation or whatever. Just the other day we actually had a fire. We've been having some fires around here since it's dry as a bone. We had a fire that took out, well, it didn't take out, sorry. They shut off all the power for our county because of this fire over by a substation. And, it was only for a few hours, but it goes to show, it's like something as simple as a grass fire can take your power out. And if it had burned out of control and taken out that substation, we would be without power for a much longer time. So it goes to show, so all this goes to show that crises can and will happen, okay? And we should know how to respond to these, in a biblical manner, okay? So some of you don't, maybe that sounds like maybe we're misapplying the Bible here. I'm going to explain what I mean by this. Okay, so I think there's 3 things that we can do in the face of these crises, or potential crises, or whatever you want to call them. And the first thing is to rise above them and stop letting them control you. We live in a world where you can hear as much bad news as you want. And there's something about the human mind that just loves bad news. I don't know what it is. It's a part of me and it's a part of everyone. They want to hear about that dramatic, terrible event. And, it's the most sensational thing. And, there's a point at which we need to be aware of things that are going on. We shouldn't be naive or whatever. But at the same time, okay, it doesn't matter if you're listening to CNN or you're listening to Fox News or you're listening to alternative news, okay? They all have agendas. But with all that aside, they all have one way of making money, okay? And that is to keep you watching. And they know that to keep you watching, they need to put bad news in front of you, right? Because that's what people want to hear. So you get onto the news, regardless of whether this is a total liar news or a news that actually seems to tell the truth, okay? You get onto the news, what are you going to see? Okay, they're going to either find the worst thing that happened in America. If nothing bad happened in America, they're going to look for the worst thing that happened in Mexico. If nothing bad happened in Mexico, they're going to look for the worst thing that happened in Uruguay. If nothing bad happened in Uruguay, they're going to look for the worst thing that happened in China. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, sympathize with other people's problems, but it's like the human body wasn't made, or the human mind, I should say, wasn't made to process all of this bad information and just this constant barrage of bad information. So I feel like before you can even think of doing something about crisis, about potential crisis, you need to step away from it. You need to separate yourself from it and actually live. Focus on living. And once you step away from it, now you can actually get some perspective on what is actually a crisis that I need to be preparing for. Do I really need to be preparing for tsunami in the middle of Nebraska? Or do I really need to be preparing for like a huge, do I need to be worried about getting mugged in a biker bar if I don't go to biker bars? I'm just saying, unless you can step away from this, I just feel like a lot of people have these crazy imaginations of what they need to be prepared for, and I just gotta think that's stressful. I don't have the mental capacity for that. If I'm going to be preparing, I want to be preparing for something that actually makes sense. A lot of people can't articulate what they're preparing for, and I think that's kind of a problem. And the simple fact of the matter is, what I want to get across in this point is that don't let crisis or potential tragedy come to you before it's even come. Like, don't run to tragedy. Don't run to crisis. Don't create a crisis in your mind trying to worry and prepare for crisis. Okay? So that's my first idea of what we could be doing. The second thing that I think that we should do is prepare for what we can prepare for. Right? There's just some things that are out of our control. I can't really do anything about getting hit by a nuclear missile. I'll be evaporated, and it's okay. I've prepared myself in a very good way because I know where I'm going after I die, because I've asked myself those tough questions. I've searched through the scriptures, and I know, and I've put my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I'm prepared. But as far as earthly preparedness goes, I think that all of us have a responsibility to be prepared. Because in the sense of that we aren't listening to people who say, everything's going to just go on and be fine. Because, the Bible talks about the false prophets who prophesy peace where there is no peace. And, the simple fact of the matter is that regardless of what happens in the next 50 years, there is going to be crisis. There always is crisis. There's never a century without crisis. And the last century was one of the most bloody centuries in all of history. And this century, I'm just saying, there's probably going to be some problems. And even if you aren't involved in a world war, even if there isn't an EMP attack that wipes out the entire grid, even if that doesn't happen, there's going to be personal crises in your life. I mean, maybe a fire will wipe out the substation, for your county, and now suddenly you're without power, So there's going to be crises, and to say, just bury your head in the sand and say, not me, never me, that won't happen to me, is stupid. Okay, so we need to prepare, but there's a couple of traps that you're going to fall into if you aren't careful. And the first is the panic buy trap. And this is where, you have to understand that there is there's a four-wheeler going by. But you got to understand that there is a complete industry built around preparedness. Like, people sell, it's this insane industry. And, people are selling things like, I hate to even start naming things, because some of you guys are going to like these things, some of you guys are going to hate these things, and if I start naming these things, saying they're bad, I'm going to start looking bad. But let's take the survival knife, for example. There is nothing worse than a survival knife. Those are actually a few out there that are actually pretty good. But the simple fact of the matter is that you can look at something, and if it says survival knife, you go, no, I'm not buying survival knife, I'm buying work knife. Because even if I had to survive, whatever that means, I'm still going to need a knife that's going to serve me, that serves me well as a work knife. Surviving is nothing more than really hard work. Okay, so you don't want to buy the survival knife if you are really worried about surviving. You want to buy the work knife, right? And I think this is a really good example, because a lot of people buy a survival knife, right? And they have no idea what they're going to do. They have no idea what they're going to do with it. They don't know how to use it, and it just sits there. And it's one of those things where it really doesn't make logical sense when you think about it. But there's people who are really good at selling this kind of thing to you, and they'll just kind of like they'll give you this wild scenario. Let's say there was a grid down, and the whole United States grid is all down, and it's gone back to jungles. You will need a big survival knife with a serrated back, which I actually had one of those. I made the thing work for like 2 years of really hard work, really hard abuse to the thing, and it did work. Okay, but it was not a knife of choice. Okay, so you're gonna need a Rambo survival knife, and you know, the problem, it's just one of those things where when you buy something for a preparedness thing, it is an expense. It's an expense, and it costs you money, right? And the only way that it becomes an asset is if you have the worst day in your life, assuming that thing actually works. The only way you're going to cash out on that expense is if you are having a really, really bad day. And I don't know, philosophically, that doesn't make sense to me. I can't reconcile that in my mind. So instead of buying these survival gadgets, okay, we use the survival knife for an example, but there's a lot of other ones, okay? Instead of buying these survival gadgets, I prefer to do what I would like to call prepare without spending money, which is not exactly accurate because it does cost money, but you're not buying expenses, you're buying assets. Okay, so what's the difference between an expense and an asset? And I kind of went over this already. An asset is something that is valuable to you and delivers value to you. An expense is something that you bought and it just sits there, okay? So, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, freeze-dried survival food is an expense. Okay, now there's some that they claim you could eat this and it actually tastes good and whatever, maybe I'm wrong. But what most people are going to do is they are going to buy freeze-dried survival food, maybe 2 months worth of freeze-dried survival food. And they're going to put that away. I don't know what the going rate is, depends on how big your family is too. But it's going to cost you at least a few $100, maybe more, and they're gonna put that away, and it lasts for a long time, right? But it doesn't last forever, and eventually that's gonna go bad. Okay, so if there's no crisis in 20 years, and you bought all that freeze-dried survival food because somebody on YouTube made you feel like you had to do it, and it's starting to go bad, there's no way to cash out on that asset unless you're gonna eat it. This going bad freeze-dried survival ration, which tastes awful. Okay. There's no way to make that cash out. That's not an asset, that's an expense. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, okay? But that's just my opinion. Instead, what if you went and bought a whole bunch of food that stores for a while, okay? Maybe not 20 years, but it stores for a while, but it's food that you eat, okay? So you had to buy this food anyways, right? But instead of buying freeze-dried survival food, which you don't eat, you buy a bunch of food that you do eat. Let's just use tomato soup, for example. So let's say that, so basically what you're going to do is you're going to stock your pantry with tomato soup. Now, eventually this is going to go bad, right? So to prevent that, we're going to eat tomato soup. And we're going to take the oldest tomato soup and we're going to eat that, and then we're just going to keep on pushing the newer stuff back. And as we replace the soup that we eat, okay, we're going to put the new stuff at the back and bring the old stuff to the front. So basically, nothing's going to waste, and nothing's going to have to sit there for years and years and years, and nothing's going to go bad. And you didn't have to waste. You didn't really have to spend any extra money, except for maybe a little bit of upfront cost, because you're basically just spending money on food that you already had to eat. I hope that makes some sense. It's called a deep pantry. There's other people who've probably explained it better than I could explain it. But I think that's a really good example of something where, yes, you spent some money to do it, but it's not it's not an expense. It's something that you had to, or maybe it is an expense, but it's something that it's an expense that you had to pay for eventually anyways. Okay, so I think that another good example would be of a wood stove. We heat our entire house with a wood stove, and we're not like doomsday preppers. We just do it because it saves us money. Okay, but at the same time, if the grid went down for some reason, we have a wood stove and we can heat our house. Granted, we would want probably a little bit of electricity. We have a generator to keep that fan going so that we actually are circulating heat throughout the house, because wood stoves in the basement, you wouldn't want to have to move everything down to the basement, but still, we got it. And there's ways to make it work. It's not a expense because it's an asset. It saves us tons and tons of money every year because we don't have to buy propane and gas. Sure, there's time is an expense. Time spent gathering and splitting wood. But you can do the math. It's way cheaper to burn wood than to heat your house with propane or electricity. So that's another example. There's just a lot of different ways that you can prepare without spending money. And before we went any further, speaking of Panic Buy Trap, I actually have a sponsor I wanted to share with you. It's called Evap Water. That's EVAP Water. Okay, and Evap Water is a little capsule of dehydrated water, which is incredible because when you're on the run with your bug out bag and you go to run around the section with your bug out bag, and before you get knocked over the head by some rioter who takes your bug out bag, and then you realize you really had nowhere to run in the first place, so you go back home without your bug out bag. Anyways, it's really hard to carry water with you when you're doing that. So Evap Water has a new solution, and what they've done is they've taken water and they've evaporated it so that you can have a whole gallon of water in just a tiny little capsule. All you have to do is add that little capsule to a gallon jug of water and add water, and you will have a gallon of water. I'm kidding. It's just funny. It's supposed to be funny, all right? If you didn't think it was funny, or if you thought it was funny, then smile. And if you smiled, give it a like. All right, so you see what I did there? I made you commit before I told you to give the video a like. Okay, so you were commit. Anyways, sorry, that's really not funny. Anyways, as I was saying, we were talking about preparing without spending money on expenses, and I don't know if I had a whole lot more to say on that, but just so much of preparedness has to do with buying something, and it's kind of silly because it's well, crises and problems will happen. In the past, the people who lived through the Dust Bowl, the people who lived through, World War, the tight times during World War II, or just different things that have happened in the past. The people who lived through those times were not people with a bunch of survival gadgets. They were people with head knowledge, people who knew how to work hard and how to make do with what they had, and so all I'm saying here is do not let the survival industry tell you that they have the answer and the only answer for all of your survival needs, and you just have to pay $9.99 for either their book or for their kit or whatever. I just don't believe in that. I believe that the people who are going to survive a catastrophe are one, ordained by God to survive that catastrophe, and two, they are people who just know how to use what they got. And that's not saying, and before I go any further, I do want to say that's not saying that you shouldn't prepare. That's not saying that you should have systems in place for likely problems. Example, electricity going out. I don't know where in the United States you're going to not have a risk of your electricity going out, whether you know it or not. Either a fire or a tornado or a flood or a snowstorm or whatever. There's always something that can take out your electricity. I think it's just a good idea to have plans, alternative plans, and not be relying on government or big industry institutions to provide all your needs for food, water, shelter, and protection. That's what you got. That's what you need. You need a shelter, a home base. If you want to be as prepared as you can get, I think you should just move out to the country. That's my opinion. Okay, I feel like that solves a ton of your problems. Civil unrest, grocery stores, nothing beyond the grocery store shelves. All that stuff is solved if you just move out to the country, grow a garden, get a wood stove, get an AR-15, and you're good. You've really solved a lot of problems there, and you'll have a lot happier life. Just my opinion. I know not all of you can do that, but I'm just gonna say at the end of the day, if you want to be as prepared as you can get, I think you got to do that. That's just my opinion. All right, so we've got that, and that was my second point. So first point, don't get caught up in all this. Second point. Prepare for what you can prepare for. And third point, live out your calling. And I know this is kind of like redundant. I feel like I say this in every episode, but you know what? It's what I live for, and it's my calling. You know, whether you are in good times or hard times, whether you're in easy life America, or you're in the middle of one of the worst days in your life, okay, you still have a calling, and it doesn't change. God doesn't change on a bad day. He still has the same calling for you. And you know what, I feel like the best thing that you can do about any of these problems that you may face, any of these things that you worry about, is just to be faithful, to be doing the things that God has called you to do, to be living out your calling as a man. If you just live out your calling as a man, as a provider, as a protector, you've got a lot of your preparedness already taken care of, and as far as just the state of our country, I feel like that's what a lot of this boils down to, the state of our country. That's why a lot of people are kind of freaking out, kind of feeling like they need to be, either buying preparedness gadgets or being more prepared, as far as that goes, the best thing you can do is just live out your calling as a Christian and as an American, as a patriot. Like, just, like the good old Constitution stuff, where, we're gonna maintain our right to keep and bear arms, because we aren't gonna just submit to government tyranny. And I'm one of those people who I'm gonna submit to the government as far as I can. But if you step all over the Constitution, I just can't do that. You've got that. You've got when you live. Okay, so there's a lot of things that people point to as the problem in our society. Be it inflation, or be it crime, be it whatever. And the simple fact of the matter is, the reason we are decaying as a society is because we're moving away from the Christian values that our nation was founded on. And as we move away from those values, there really is no other alternative than that we face God's judgment. So here's what I'm going to say. In order to bring back America, in order to create a safe place for your children, if you're one of the older people watching this, the best thing you can do is just live out your calling as a Christian, as a man, and maybe as other people see you do that, maybe they will turn, and maybe they will start living out their calling as a Christian, as a man. And that's how revival starts. It doesn't start with some, it doesn't start big. It starts small. It has to start small. And the simple fact of the matter is, it always starts with you. All right? So I guess that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about how we should react to crisis, not get overly involved in it, prepare for what we can prepare for, and at the end of the day, just continue to live out your calling, because there's really nothing you can do about it. You're not a prophet or the son of a prophet. You don't know what's going to happen, and so long as you are fulfilling the calling that God has for you, then you're going to be good, all right? So maybe that's a little bit cryptic, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Anyways, I did not have a question. Nobody put in a question or a topic that they wanted me to discuss in the second half of the show, which is fine because we're almost at 30 minutes anyways. I guess I went a little bit long there, but that's okay. We didn't do one for 2 or 3 weeks. We haven't done one for 2 or 3 weeks, however long it's been. If you do have a question or a topic that you'd like me to discuss, like either a question about something I say in the show or just a question in general, and I'm not saying something like you're like you think I have all the answers or anything. I'm just saying something you're like, hey, I wonder what Caleb thinks of whatever. I would be absolutely to the moon pleased if you would leave that down below in the comments. And you know what? The simple fact of the matter is that there are very few people who do that. And so if you do that, there's like a 98% chance that you will be featured on Nebraska Farm Boy. And I'll even say your name and everything. Well, the name that you give me, of course. And it'll be really cool. So go ahead and do that. And Kaylee is turning on the tractor, so it's going to get really loud. Without any further ado, we'll see you next time.